everyone, I'm Abigail, this is Bentley, and welcome to another Two Kids interview. We are joined by award-winning author Rob Buyea. Mr. Buyea has written the Perfect Score trilogy, What Comes Next, The Daredevils, and of course, the four-book Mr. Terupt series. Thank you so much for being with us today.
You're you're super welcome. That's a great introduction. I love it.
Your books seem almost designed to be read aloud in class. Was that intentional?
Wow, Abigail, you've got me even more excited now because your first question is not one that I'm always asked. But the truth is, when I was writing the first Mr. Terupt novel, because of Mr. Terupt, I absolutely pictured it while writing it, I could picture a teacher reading it aloud. I was still teaching myself when I first began writing that novel, and I used to love reading aloud to my students. And so I think that just kind of happened naturally for me. But I absolutely pictured a teacher reading aloud. I think that envisioning it that way, visualizing it like that, maybe also played into the short chapter nature of it. And I also think the fact that I was still teaching and the fact that life was really busy for me while working on that novel, I was kind of squeezing writing in these sort of small time frames. And again, I think the idea, the way that it just evolved, those short chapters, maybe that was part of it as well.
Did the my phone thing actually happen?
So here's what I could say. You could ask me, did it ever really happen, about a lot of parts in all of my books? And the answer is going to be the same always. And the answer is yes, sort of, but not really. So there's a lot of me taking memories from when I was a kid or memories from when I was a teacher, memories from all different parts of my all different points from my lifetime. I sneak those memories into the story. I have a lot of fun doing that, but I never write it down the way it really happened. It really becomes fun when I start to add imagination and creativity to these things, and I change it to make it even better in the book. That is so much fun for me as a writer. So, did any of it really happen? Yes, sort of, but not really.
The Mr. Turret books have 7 kids. The Perfect Score is a group of 5 kids. Do you have to change your mindset when writing for each different character in a book?
I mean, yes, you definitely have to remember who the character is, and I do my very best to put myself in that kid's shoes so that I can really, think about what are they going to say, do, how are they going to feel, react, all of that. And when writing with multiple perspectives, of course, I have to spend a lot of time doing my very best to make sure these kids don't sound too similar. And so that's when you get into talking about voice as a writer and all that fancy stuff. I guess you could say a change of mindset. I certainly have to think carefully. That doesn't mean I get it all right the first time. I just want to make clear, revising. Revising is what helps me develop voice and make them distinct ultimately in the end. That's by far most of my work, the revising.
You were done with Mr. Terupt after the second book, and were done again after the third and started writing the Perfect Score series. And then you wrote the fourth. Goodbye, Mr. Terupt. And now seem done again. But are you really?
uh I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I got to be careful answering that because you're right. I did think I was done after 2. Definitely thought I was done after 3, and now there's 4. I think I'm done, but who knows, right? So, I got done with book 3, and I did write the entire Perfect Score series, 3 books, and then I went back to number 4. Why? Because after number 3, readers didn't leave me alone. And I'm very happy to say this. But I had lots of emails and letters from readers asking for more. Some of those emails begging for more, others demanding for more. Some that even said, "You've got to write it. Here are some ideas, and when you get done, dedicate it to me." So it was fun to get all of those. But I did, in fact, dedicate book 4, Goodbye, Mr. Terupt, to my readers. It's because of all those emails and letters that that I'd say I finally found the courage to go ahead and write book 4, because I had 3 books that were very successful, and at that point you start to get, I don't know, maybe a little bit concerned that, okay, I go ahead and try a 4th book, and I don't want to ruin things. I don't want to have one. But I just had to remind myself that I could continue to revise and rewrite and work until I had it just right. So get over that fear. And that's a big thing. No matter what you pursue in life, you really can't be afraid of failure. You got to put yourself out there and go for it. So I reminded myself of that, and I went ahead and tackled book 4, thanks to all my readers, and dedicated it to them, like I said. So that's what happened with Goodbye, Mr. Terupt. And so am I now getting emails and letters asking, demanding, begging for more? Yes. Yes, I had an email just a couple of days ago from another reader with some ideas about what to do in book 5. So um, I'm not actively writing book 5. I'm working on new projects, some other ideas. Will there ever be another one to add to the series? Who knows? Time will tell.
Yeah, what about a prequel?
That's an idea I've had for a long time, Abigail. So what about it? We'll see.
When you came up with the idea for the 7 kids in Mr. Terupt, you already decided to write a book. But you were working on a different story when you got the idea for those 7 kids and would end up stop writing that other story. What was that abandoned story?
I am impressed with your research. You have put together some really cool questions, because you've taken time to get to know a little bit about, I guess, me and the backstory here. So you're absolutely right. I was working on a different project. I had a character in that one called Fenner. That was her name, and she was tough and smart and super cool. And I had a really good idea. And so I was working on that project. It was the first story I ever tackled. It was the idea that put me on this journey of trying to publish a book. And I learned a lot about writing along the way, the process, just all of it. And I did some important networking. I found a really terrific group of friends, other aspiring writers, and we developed this writing group, and we were getting together and meeting weekly, sharing chapters with each other, giving each other support, encouragement, and feedback. It was fantastic. Um, and thanks to that first project, Fenner, I ended up at a writing conference where I was able to actually meet with an editor about Fenner. I had to submit a chapter to that conference, and based on that chapter, you were either invited or not. And I was able to go and meet and talk about Fenner. It was all very exciting. But even though all of that was going on, sure enough, there was a day when I got hit by the idea for hit by the idea for Mr. Terupt, and it was the 7 kids that wouldn't leave me alone. You're right. I decided to take Fenner and put it on hold and get started with this Mr. Terupt gang to see what would happen, and that's the one that kind of took off. But you're asking, what was the Fenner project about? I would say that one was borderline tween, young adult, a little bit older of a story. Um, middle, I'd say 7th, 8th grade character maybe. And that one was a dystopia. So I really enjoy those stories, those worlds that don't exist but could. And that's kind of what I was working on. So I don't know how much of I'm telling you about that. I don't know if I'll ever get back to that story, or if what was important about Fenner is just the amount that I learned about writing along the way. That certainly was the case. So I don't know I don't know. Maybe I'll end up back to Fenner someday down the road. Maybe not.
You should
Um,
do it. Yeah, you should definitely do it. You should.
we'll
I
we'll see.
We know you don't have a favorite character in the Mr. Turup's books, but if one of those kids could come to life for an afternoon for you to hang out with, which one would you spend that afternoon with, and what activity would you do with them?
Well, certainly would not be bored if I was hanging out with Peter. I'm pretty sure of
Yes,
that.
yes.
So there'd be some good fun, some mischief for sure. So Peter
Yeah.
comes to mind. Peter comes to mind right away. But I generally um I whenever I'm asked about that sort of question, Danielle's the one that comes to mind right away. So here's the deal. I told you when you asked, did any of it really happen? Yes, sort of, but not really. When it comes to characters, there's pieces of me in all these kids as well. So there's some truth with the characters, some more than others. But Danielle is a pretty important connection for me. So growing up, my grandmother lived right next door to me. And of all the people I've had in my life, she was one of the most important. I had a very special relationship with her. So that big, important piece for my life became part of Danielle's story. It's part of her character. She's the one with this dynamite grandmother that lives right next door. Her grandmother's a huge part of her life, part of her story. So if I were to be able to hang out with any of these kids, Danielle comes to mind because I feel like I'd have a chance to hang out with my grandmother again if that were to happen. And of course, I would jump at that opportunity. So she's the one I'd pick.
Have your daughters influenced your books at all?
There are, so just like I said, pieces of me, there's pieces of them in these characters as well. Some bigger connections, some smaller connections, some things that they've done or been involved in that I've taken and added imagination to make a whole lot better too. So you've asked me quite a bit about Mr. Terupt. There's an epic twisty slide scene in The Perfect Score in the first book in that series that is crazy funny, I think. And there's a little bit of that was inspired thanks to my kid coming home talking about the twisty slide, and I added a whole lot of imagination to really spice that one up and make it better. So there's a little teaser for you.
Is that the Peon Slide story?
Oh, okay. I was trying not to give anything away, Abigail, but yes, absolutely. So the P part didn't happen with my kid, but anyway, yeah, that was inspiration. That's a good one.
What is your process when putting your book together? Do you decide the end before the middle, or do you put it together in order?
Another great question. This writing process isn't the same for everybody, so you could get all sorts of different answers to that question. And I'm sure if you're interviewing other authors and asking that question, it's got to be really fascinating to hear all the different answers. So here's mine. Generally speaking, it is a beginning, middle, end, kind of moving in that order, but not entirely. Sometimes there's a middle scene that comes to me right away, and that's what gets me really excited about the book. And it's one of the things that won't leave me alone. It makes me ultimately want to write the book. So again, I think of The Perfect Score. There's a really, really kind of I don't know if hostile is the right word, but a really charged scene that takes place at the parent-teacher conferences. And that was one of the first ideas I had for that book, and I was just so excited about it. So that's a middle scene that I ended up writing early on because I just had it and I had to get it down on paper. Um, with Mr. Terupt, that first book, I wrote the first couple scenes, first couple chapters. So Luke's begins with this thing called the Dollar Word Project. And as I was writing Luke, so this is a good thing too. Some of my best ideas come to me while I'm writing, as I'm doing the work. I don't wait until I have it all figured out because it's never perfect the first time for me. So as I was writing Luke's opening chapter, I had him talking about the Dollar Word Project. And as I was writing that scene, that's when I came up with the idea for him sharing dollar words throughout the book. I didn't know I was going to do that until writing his opening chapter. And once I had that figured out, well, it helped me figure out how the book was going to end. I went ahead and wrote the last page in that first book before I had 10 pages done. I knew that Luke would end the story the way that he does. And I got all of that came to me while working on the beginning. So in that case, I jumped pretty far ahead and wrote the last page. The Perfect Score again, I remember I got the first chunk done and then I got stuck in the middle. I wasn't sure what to do. So here's a little bit of advice about handling writer's block, if that's something you talk about. I never tell myself I have writer's block, by the way. Yes, I get stuck, but I won't say I have writer's block. That would freak me out. But I did get hung up in the middle, so I left the middle alone. I went and I wrote the ending. And as I was working on the ending of The Perfect Score, that helped me figure out more of what I wanted to do in the middle, because I did have a pretty good sense of what I wanted to do in the end. So for the most part, it's in order, but there are cases where I'll jump around and, write a scene that maybe happens later if it's really waiting for me or begging me to write it, I guess.
You talked about how revision takes up a lot of time. Can you tell us more about that process?
Um, I don't I don't know if I would say it takes up a lot of time. I guess if you add it all up in the end, it's definitely most of the work. So tell you more about that. Well, again, I don't wait until I have it all figured out. I have enough of it figured out. I'm really excited. I can't wait. I get busy writing. As I write, I get new ideas. I learn more about the story, more about the character. So things grow from there. I try to keep going. As you're writing that first chapter, you'll get these ideas, things will change, and you could go back and revise it right away. I don't. I try to keep going, because by the time I get done with the second chapter, more has changed. And if you just keep going back and rewriting, you, I don't know if you ever get anywhere. I try to keep going, keep going, and get as far through the whole project as I can before I finally go back and rewrite because so much changes by the time I get to the end. So, but after, I might get 40, 50 pages into it, and then I'm going to have to go back and revise and rewrite because so much has changed at that point. I need to kind of clear it up and really get it organized, and that's going to help me know what I want to do moving beyond that point. It really helps me get things figured out. So I guess there's a lot of that. I do a lot of revising. So I don't know if this is what you meant by your question, but a lot of my revising is on paper. I'll type it in, I'll draft it on the computer, but then I print it out and I need to do the crossing out and changing and all of that stuff on paper. That's still how it works best for me. And then I'll take all that messy stuff on paper and type it in and start over.
Um, did you ever have a Jeffrey kind of character in your life that you added to the book?
So so my answer here isn't just about Jeffrey, but the characters as a whole, all of them in all of my books. So I had told you there's pieces of me, pieces of my kids in there. There's bits and pieces of lots of different people, definitely former students. I had all of those kids in my classroom every year. I had a lot of Peters, a lot of Lexis, Lukes, Jeffries, trust me, lots of them. So there's bits and pieces of all sorts of former students, bits and pieces of kids I remember from when I was in school, pieces of me, pieces of my own children, all sorts of different people. Then imagination and creativity, add it together. You'll glue it all together, and that's how you get my characters. So when you ask about Jeffrey in particular, I had students who certainly could be stubborn, like Jeffrey, really dig their heels in, and that's certainly the sour attitude about school. Absolutely, I had kids that like that for sure. But as far as the backstory, which is probably what you're wondering about, everything with his family, his brother, that's largely imagination. That's when I first started writing the book, I knew I had this kid who was grumpy, grouchy, not excited about school, really sour attitude. That's all I knew about him. But I was excited. He was different from all the others. It was fun for me as a writer to be that really sour kid. It was fun. I kept going with it, kept writing. But as I continued to spend more time with Jeffrey, did more writing, I had to really begin asking, why are you like this? What's going on? So there's a lot of that with characters that ultimately helps you to develop the character fully and ultimately capture voice, create voice, make them distinct. There's a lot of asking your character questions. What's important to you? What do you want? What do you love? What do you care about? What are you hoping for? What are you worried about? Scared of, ashamed of, embarrassed of, angry over, Jeffrey? What are you angry about? What's got you so upset? Those questions are the things that ultimately led me to his backstory, which again is largely imagination. But that's not to say that sometimes when you ask those questions, you might answer them with personal connections or, things that you hear in the news or pieces of other people.
Rejection is a part of most writers' stories. Can you tell us about that part of your journey?
Oh, yeah. So you're right. I do not know of a writer who didn't get rejected before getting published. Maybe you've come across one, but I couldn't name one for you right now. So that's something I always try to share with students. And it goes back to what I said earlier. You can't be afraid of failure. What's important is that you learn from it. If you can learn from those failures along the way, it's going to help you become smarter, better, stronger. Helps you ultimately succeed in the end, what you've learned from those failures along the way. So I did have rejections, and they were not easy. They're I mean, they're painful, for sure. I remember, so the so here's what happened. I was at a conference with a first pages panel. You could go to this big conference and turn in just page one of a story you were working on, and I turned in Peter. I hadn't shared it with anybody. It was my first opportunity to do that. And at the end of that 2-day conference, they had a first pages panel where they had this table of editors. There were 3 editors who sat. They had a gentleman who stood at the front of the room, and he read these first pages aloud. And he had selected, I think they had maybe 6 or 8 that they read that day. That's it. Out of hundreds of people, I never expected him to have Peter, but he did. And when he turned it over and started reading, holy smokes, was I scared. I was so scared. He was reading mine. I couldn't believe it. And he finished and passed the microphone, and every editor said they loved it and would absolutely want to keep reading. And thanks to me having friends there who elbowed me and said, "This is your chance. You've got to go introduce yourself." And had they not been there with me, I would have left that day without ever approaching the editors. I would have missed my chance. But thanks to them encouraging me, I went up there and introduced myself and told them that was my project and asked them if I could send it. And they all said, "Yes, please send it." And I asked them, "When do you need it?" Just so I knew, and they told me. And so I left that day really excited, right? All of a sudden, I had people who wanted to read my story. What I didn't tell them is I didn't have it written. I was just working on it. I was nowhere near done, but I didn't tell them that. They told me when they needed it, and I went home and got busy writing as much as I could, as fast as I could, and I didn't finish it in time. It just wasn't possible. So I sent the first part to the editor, to one of the editors. You never send only half a story, but I figured if I don't send it, the answer's no. I've missed out. If I do send it, what's the worst that can happen? The answer's no. So I sent it, and I got that first email that said, "I love it. How dare you send only the first 80 pages? I want the rest. Send it." All these exclamation points. And I was so excited. And I got it done and sent it. And then came the first rejection letter. It's lovely. It's powerful. It's not right for me. So the answer is no. Good luck. So that was hard, but I also felt like I was getting closer. So I kept trying, and there were more rejections. There was a revision letter. "I think you're onto something. It needs more work. Here's what I suggest. This, and this. If you want to do this, and this, and I know it's a lot of work, I'd be happy to read it again. I spent 9 months doing this, and this." Sent it, got a letter. "Thanks for doing this, and this, but unfortunately, my answer is no. Good luck." So that one was really hard. But again, I really felt like I was close at that point. I felt really strong about the story and kept trying. And eventually, somebody did say yes. So there were rejections along the way, and they were not easy. They're painful. There have been rejections for me since publishing these books. It's still part of what can happen for me, and it's never easy. But I guess you've got to pick yourself up and get back to work and keep going is what happens. And I guess I'm rambling on here, Abigail. This is an important question. Here's one thing I could tell you. I got done with Mr. Terupt Falls Again, book 2, and I moved on to new projects at that point. And I thought I had a different book in the making, and then things fell through, and that story didn't happen. And that was really tough. I had to pick myself up and keep going. And I ended up moving on to this third Mr. Terupt book. But some of those characters and ideas in that project that didn't happen, what I have found over time is so there was a character in that project that didn't happen named Natalie Kurtzman. She was this tiny character, only showed up in a couple scenes. She wasn't one of the voices, nothing like that, but I really liked her. There's something about that girl I didn't forget. And when I moved on to the perfect score, I took Natalie Kurtzman out of that project that didn't happen, and I gave her a voice. And when I did that, man, oh man, the girl had a lot to say. Her character took off. So sometimes even that writing that doesn't get published, that that doesn't happen, it's still all important in the end. Sometimes you maybe just have to find the right place for a character or for that scene. And it might take a while, but it can happen.
We have interviewed a number of authors who've had books banned, and that means in those places, kids don't have the same access to books that we have and may not be able to see themselves represented in those books. Can you give us your thoughts on this?
Wow, that's a mature question coming from the two of you. I guess the first word that comes to mind is sad. Um, sad. I also think about the teachers and librarians who this has impacted, and there are some really horrible stories out there around that. So they come to mind right away. Yeah, I guess I have a lot of emotions around that. Concerned, bothered, thinking about how I can be an ally in that and help in that capacity. So I guess those are some things that come to mind.
What writer has had the most influence on you?
Well, if you remember, I was talking about I went to the conference with Fenner and I met with an editor. At that conference, the keynote speaker was Richard Peck. Now, Mr. Peck is no longer alive, but he wrote some amazing books while he was here. And I will tell you that out of all of the presentations and presenters I've listened to along the way, he's still the number one presentation I've attended. His talk was amazing that day, and it really made a difference for me. And I'll tell you why. Because as I sat in that audience listening to him that day, I had just started to play around with Mr. Terupt. And my story began with Jessica. I had her character nailed, her first day of school nailed. I thought I was all set. And one of the things Mr. Peck said that day was, "You're only as good as your first sentence. You're only as good as your first sentence." And he said that, and I knew right away I had to change my beginning because Jessica was too quiet, too nice, wasn't going to grab the reader, wasn't going to make my reader react. And that's how I think about my beginnings. I want to do something with the very first sentence that makes you react. And a reaction can be any number of different things, but if I get you to react, I think there's a good chance you keep reading. And so as Mr. Peck was talking, I opened my writing notebook and I wrote down Peter's name. I knew he was the one I had to start with, and I wrote down his first sentence. It's our bad luck to have teachers in this world, but since we're stuck with them, the best we can do is hope to get a brand new one instead of a mean old fart. And that was it. It never changed after that. And how important was that? I just told you I was at a first pages panel and the editors read Peter and they all wanted to read my story. It's all thanks to Mr. Peck. So, I mean, Richard Peck is a name that definitely comes to mind right away when I'm asked about writers who've influenced me and made a difference. His talk was super important for me that day. I'll tell you what, there's one other thing he said that made me a better writer on the spot. He said, what we write, the story in the end, what it's all about, it's about our characters taking steps towards change. So there's somebody different on the last page than they were on the first. That is something I think about very carefully with every single story that I tackle. That piece of advice made me a better writer on the spot. Just listening to him say that, hear how he said it, it was really important.
What advice do you have for young writers?
Couple things. One, I call this the writing switch. If you think of a light switch on the wall, you can flip it on and off. And most likely a lot of students turn their writing switch on when asked to write in school and turn it off after that. But what's different for me and many authors is the switch never turns off. Every day as you go through daily life, you go through it thinking like a writer, thinking about your characters, the story you're working on, you're paying attention to what's going on around you, like a scientist making observations. And so then you notice things. And the key, when you notice something, wonder, how could it be used in a story with a character? What if this were to happen? Some of my very best sentences and ideas, my best, have happened in my head when far away from the writing desk. I cannot emphasize that enough. Some of the very, very best things I've come up with in the head went away from the desk. So that's one very important piece of advice. Turn the writing switch on. And the other thing I would say is don't fall into the trap of thinking that in order for you to be a writer, you shouldn't think that means you've got to sit down at your writing desk for 6 hours a day every day. I don't that's I don't think that has to happen. What's more important is, can you carve out 15 minutes a day on a consistent basis? Consistent. Can you do it 5, 6, 7 days a week? Can you do it over and over, like, consistently like that? Just those small chunks of time, because then your characters and your stories are with you all the time. You're just going to be thinking about them every day. And that's going to help feed into the writing switch, and it's going to help the ideas grow. And I think that you're just going to see that you're going to make progress if you can do that, as opposed to one day for many hours. Take small chunks, do it consistently.
Can you tell us about a project that you are working on now?
Actually, I'm just finishing up what's going to be book number 10, the title, Carter Avery's Tricky Fourth Grade Year. So, that's the one I'm just wrapping up. Actually, it's with copy editing right now, so I'm going to get it back and have to go over it a little bit more, but that should be probably around this time next year. And so Carter is, well, maybe you can think about the boy in your own class who nobody wants to work with, sit with, maybe the boy who finds himself in trouble often. So you might say that that's Carter. And perhaps you also know of a teacher that nobody ever seems to want to get for their teacher. That happens to be Ms. Crane. And so you've got the teacher nobody wants, the boy that nobody wants in class, and well, they find themselves together. You might say they're a match made in heaven. And the funny thing is, when somebody is given a chance, these classroom projects and otherwise chance encounters, well, they can become a whole lot more when somebody's given a chance. So, and when your teacher believes in you, anything's possible. So it's a really fun story. There's a whole lot in Carter Avery's story that year that will make you laugh, that will make you stop and think and feel, for sure. So a fun one I'm really excited about.
I'd read that. And you can relate to that. No, I can't. Finally, it's time for our Turbo 10 rapid fire questions. Are you?
Oh man, you might see I'm not good at the rapid thing already. I've been rambling, so I'm going to do my best just to spit out answers. I'm ready. I'm ready. Fire away.
Number 1, what is your favorite phrase to use?
Favorite phrase? Oh my goodness. I don't know. When I'm feeling old, I might say something like, that's got more nonsense than Carter's got liver pills, or something like that. You'll have to look that up.
Take Carter's little liver pills and follow the Carter's 3-week plan.
That's from my grandmother. Carter's got liver pills. That goes back to my grandmother.
Number 2, what is one subject you'd love to learn more about?
Subject I'd love to learn more about. Wowzer. I guess I'm going to have to say medicine.
Number 3, what's your go-to snack food?
Go-to snack food. Right now, I'd have to say it's honey roasted almonds. Just got those. They're pretty darn yummy.
Number 4, from the research we did, I'm a little worried asking this. What was your favorite book growing up?
You're saying that because I wasn't much of a reader as a kid. So the one book I remember reading on my own was My Side of the Mountain, Gene Craighead George. And that, you could see how that helps with my character, Waylon in the Daredevils. That's referenced. He's the kid who wants to be like Sam Gribley. Sam's from that book. So there you go. That's my pick.
Number 5, if you could teleport somewhere right now, where would you go?
Teleport someplace? Where would I go?
Hmm?
Wowzer. Probably on a Disney cruise.
Number 6, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
I guess everybody probably says either flying or invisibility. I don't like heights, but I'd still pick flying, I think.
Number 7, what was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
He-Man, Masters of the Universe.
Number 8. What is your favorite rainy day activity?
Oh, I'd have to say reading. Get a good book.
Number 9. If you could have any 3 dinner guests, who would they be?
It'd be my wife, my sister, and brother-in-law. There you go. Not anybody I haven't met. That might be awkward at dinner. I know there's lots of people I'd like to meet and talk to, but those 3 always have a fantastic time with them. Lots of laughs, lots of fun. That's my pick.
Number 10. What is the best piece of advice you were ever given?
This is a piece of advice. I remember reading it on the back of a kid's t-shirt at a wrestling tournament when I was very young. And the quote was this: the largest room in the world is the room for improvement. And that has stuck with me ever since. I think that's a good piece of advice, a good motto, no matter what you pursue moving forward. Largest room in the world is a room for improvement. So that's something I keep in mind. I guess that's my answer.
So the advice is read t-shirts.
Sure, Bentley, you can go that way too.
You were amazing. Thank you
I don't
so
know
much.
how rapid I was, Abigail. Sorry, I feel bad about that.
Some people aren't rapid either. Yeah.
Oh, all right, I'm not alone then. That's good to know.
And thank you so much for spending this time with us. I can't wait to read your future books.
Thanks. Thank you for inviting me and having me on. This has been a super fun podcast, the 2 of you. You might have a future as, TV hosts or podcasts and something, but keep it going. Good stuff.